Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Tom Matt Show. And I am your host, Tom Matt. Last week, excellent show with Judge Rosemarie Aquilina. I call her Rosie, you call her Judge. And if you go before her, good luck because she does not play. And I'll tell you, but her life story is so incredible. And I titled that one Being Fearless. So if you missed that one, go get the podcast on the website or on Spotify or iTunes or whatever your preferred mode of podcast is. Lots of people like the Spotify thing. I do the Spotify thing. So it's like, okay, Spotify is super easy and it's free and it's cool and it works. Great. Today, my brother, another brother from another mother, met him a few years ago. Third time on the show. Hard to get, but he's just when I can get him, I get him. And it's like Robert Bryce is the man. Going to call this one the flamethrower, and I'll explain that in a second. Bio's about 14 pages long. I'm going to do one paragraph. Robert Bryce is a Texas-based author. No offense to my man, Robert. Texas-based author, journalist, podcaster, film producer, excellent film producer, great writer, public speaker, all over the place. Over the past 3, 4, 5 decades, his articles have appeared in numerous publications, including Wall Street Journal, New York Times, all the big ones, all the big ones. His documentary, Juice, How Electricity Explains the World, is excellent. I mean, it's all over you got to check out the whole variety of content that Robert's created in his life. I found him through the Enron book long time ago that he wrote a long time ago that I read several years ago, and it was just awesome. So I've read a couple of his books, and they're all good. I want to welcome back to the radio program, without much further ado, the flamethrower himself, Robert Bryce. Robert, how are you?
More. Hey, Tom, that's I'm not sure I deserve that all that of an introduction. All it reminds me, I heard it was a British guy, it was a British military guy, and he was getting this long flowery introduction, and he gets up on the stage and he says, "Well, thank you for that introduction. It's one that my mother would have believed and my father would have appreciated."
Well, the whole thing with flamethrower, we'll get to the whole context of this thing because I've got several things I want to discuss with you as far as energy,
Sure.
obviously, the energy guy. First, this is your life. You're all over the place. Tell everybody about the fam, what you're doing with your career and your traveling and all of the speeches that you do. I follow. If everybody that's listening to the show, Robert's very active on all the social medias as we are, LinkedIn, TikTok, you name it. He's there. His little videos are greatness. Check them out. But what's going on in your life, man?
Well, I'm incredibly blessed, Tom. I do travel a lot. I do a lot of public speaking. I have 40 some odd engagements on my calendar this year. I was in Canada last week. I was in Kansas City on Monday speaking to the Kansas Electric Cooperatives. Got to talk to some of my favorite people in the world. I got to talk to farmers. I love farmers. They're never happy, but they're the most optimistic people you'll ever meet. You ask them how's things. Oh, well, commodity prices are down and diesel is up and these guys raise cattle too. How's the cattle business? Oh, they're just pets. We don't make any money. And, but they're born optimistic. And this one guy met, he farms 5,000 acres in Larned, Kansas. And he said, I'm 77. My wife tells me to quit. He said, I don't want to, I like this. This is what I do. He said, I'm going to keep doing it. And so I don't know. I've been incredibly fortunate to do what I do. I've got a great family. Lauren and I have been married 38 years. We have 3 great kids, Mary, Michael, and Jacob. Those are the things that are the center of my life. And then I do this energy and power thing too.
You're a refired guy. I mean, the refirement zone, as we like to say on this program, is all about making that pivot from being retired or refired. And I mean, retirement can start when you're 30 years old. You can refire anytime, but throughout your career, you have done multiple times when and you're continuing to do it. Just like you're talking about with the farmer in Kansas. I mean, when you're talking to farmers over there, it's like at 77 years old, that's young. Keep working, keep doing what you like to do and find things that you like to do. I mean, tell people about your career and you've written all these books, you've done all these things all over the place, and just kind of give them for people that are new to the show, a little bit more of a backstory about you, because you spoke before Congress. You've like you said, you've got 40 gigs this year, dude. Go for it.
Well, okay. Well, the Cliff Notes version, I've been a reporter my whole career, never had a real job. Written 6 books, co-produced 2 documentaries. The latest is our new docuseries, Juice, Power, Politics, and the Grid. I co-produced that with my colleague Tyson Culver. He directed, did just a fantastic job. Kudos to Tyson for all the work he did in bringing all these disparate elements and interviews together. We've had 3 million views of the new docuseries. It's available on YouTube for free, juicetheseries.com. Tom, did I mention juicetheseries.com? I hope I mentioned juicetheseries.com.
I'm hoping that because you mentioned it before, and I'm hoping like 2.5 million of those people came from our show. So,
well,
I mean,
at least 2.8 million, but
I mean, that's why we do this stuff. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah. So I do that. I do a lot of public speaking. I've done these documentaries, and now I'm on Substack, robertbryce.substack.com. That's where I do almost all my writing these days, because I can write what I want, how I want, when I want, and there's a lot to talk about. And I've been lately very fired up about the offshore wind energy scandal, and it is a scandal of the first order. Also paying attention, of course, to the presidential race and the energy politics thereof. So. And also just wondering, how is it that we got to this point in presidential politics? I mean, who would believe where we are if you wrote a novel and just over the weekend, the third party candidate, Robert Kennedy Jr., admits that he dumped a dead baby bear cub in Central Park, New York City 10 years ago? It's like, you couldn't write this. I mean, you couldn't make it up and people would believe you. It's just so incredibly, total bonkers, crazy town.
It is unbelievable. The last month, as we record this, the last month in media, which would be July, now we're in early August here as we're recording, it was crazy. I mean, it was just like you say, if you had to write a script for the most outrageous story ever, no one would ever buy it, because it was like, no way, this would never happen.
And we have the Democratic nominee who is going to, is now running for president, and she was never got a single vote from a actual American in the primary process. And then we have the Republican who's, I don't know, at least partly unhinged, maybe completely unhinged, and he gets shot in the ear. It's like, what, really? And then you have the June 27th debate, and where Biden very clearly is non compos mentis, and he's later forced out of the race by a quiet coup apparently by the Obamas. But the next day, the June 28th, the Supreme Court hands down the Loper-Bright decision, which ends Chevron deference and is a major threat to the administrative state, which I think is a great thing. I mean, really a long overdue decision. But truly, the last 2 months in American politics have been as tumultuous as any I can recall in my lifetime. And I'm an old man, not as old as you, Matt, but I'm just turned 64. So,
Oh, no. I'm older than you, brother. I'm 65. So we're right. It's all good, man. It's all good. I want to hear more about the Chevron ordinance. We got about a minute to go. Can you set that up? Back and talk about that?
Well, I don't know if I can do it in a minute, but Chevron deference is a 40-year precedent in administrative law in the United States that was struck down by the Supreme Court in this June 28th Loper-Bright decision. So what it means is that they essentially are going to be able to rein in the administrative state, like the EPA and these greenhouse gas rules, the EPA's rule on electric vehicles, et cetera. So it really is an incredibly important decision. Lobbyists are going to have a field day. But I think it's important for average Americans to understand that this is a break on an unaccountable bureaucracy that was long overdue.
We'll come back. We'll finish.
That was about a minute. That was about a minute, wasn't it? I didn't time it. But
not bad. I mean, you got this thing down, and since now this is your podcast, you can come on this radio show podcast anytime you want and talk about this stuff, and we'll do all the production work, and you can go out there and speak and write books and do all that good stuff for you. So,
awesome.
Let me reset this thing, everybody. Robert Bryce is here. I call him RB. He's my bro. He's a good friend who we got to know each other the last couple of years doing radio, talking about the economy, talking about energy. And I mean, energy drives our economy. If you miss any of his episodes before, just go to our website, tommattshow.com. You can find those. I'm going to call this one the flamethrower. And I'm going to leave you with this teaser here. If you live in the Midwest and you're hearing our voice on the Michigan Talk Network or however you're getting this thing, first thing I'm going to ask Robert is about motor fuel and the offshore wind stuff. We'll talk about that, but how summer grade fuel blend in Midwest got changed to keep fuel prices depressed. And if you're not aware of this, I'm going to talk about this right out of break here when we come back again. Robert Bryce is here, the flamethrower. This is the Tom Matt Show. I got that article pulled up too. All right, let's roll. I got to read the do and then we'll go. Let me get that thing out. I'm going to I'm going to read this quote. I can't wait. Here we go. So fun. So great. Boom. There. Here we go. We get Craig. Onward. Segment 2 of the Tom Matt Show, sponsored by, you know who, Craig Styles. Been sponsoring segment 2 for, I don't know, long time, 5-6 years. My man, he handles all of our retirement zone savings. You don't know what the retirement zone is? You found the spot. This is it. Ameriprise Financial, Craig Styles has all of our retirement zone savings. Even when the market does crazy things, I don't even really worry about it because I know that with Ameriprise and Craig and the Desideri Analytics algorithm, everything's going to be fine. He can help you plan for the life you want today and well into the future, like he's doing for Sandy and I, and it's working great. With the right financial advisor, life can be brilliant. Call Craig, please, 1-800-528-1355. Local number 517-483-4893. Craig.styles@ampf.com is his email. Easiest way to get him is that way, or on our website, tommattshow.com. Go down to the bottom of the homepage, and our sponsors are all listed there. His offices are located in a new spot, 2651 Coolidge Road, Suite 103, East Lansing, Michigan, 48823. Stations that have carried us in the past, in the future, our syndication on the Michigan Talk Network. We go in and out of radio stations all the time. WGHN 92.1 FM in Grand Haven, Michigan was the first to ever carry us on broadcast radio, and I'm always grateful to Will Tiemann and Wendy Hart for doing that for us, giving us that confidence. WGIM 1240 AM is the big, it's the big stick in Lansing. It's the flagship of the Michigan Talk Network. WJRW 1340 in Grand Rapids, WKOQ 1490 Muskegon, Whitehall, WYPV FM 94.5 Mackinac City, way up north. And of course, our PBS affiliate at Michigan State University, AM 870 WKAR News Talk, and simulcast on 102.3 FM on Sundays at 5 p.m. Again, thanking Craig Styles for sponsoring segment 2 and creating Desideri Analytics, where we are making light of weighted decisions. And lastly, I want to say thank you to the Grubers, Steve and Ivy, for having the faith in us, for carrying us on the Michigan Talk Network for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now. We're going to be starting our 14th season here in a couple of months, and it's kind of blows my mind a little bit. All right, back to the show. Got my buddy back, Robert Bryce. Love talking to Robert. He's such a pro, so much fun to talk to, so interesting. Robert, I was talking to a student when I was at the gym this morning, and telling her about the program and how another student had forwarded the podcast over to her mom. And I said, our show is really liked by a lot of our age, boomers, younger Gen Xers. I said, but the young people really have been gravitating more and more to our show. And I said, this episode I'm recording today, referring to you, is very interesting. I said, we do a lot of what's going on in today's society stuff. And Robert Bryce talking energy. And this young woman was so interested. And she's just like, these young people are very, very smart. And they want to know what's going on. And if you educate them, if you talk to them, if you help them understand, like you're going to do now, help people understand what the heck's going on out there, it makes all the difference. Now, I left the previous thread with talking about this summer grade fuel blend, which I really never understood how that all works. Kind of thought it was sort of a scam, but whatever it is, I don't know. I just pay for my fuel when I get my gas. But this is a quote from an article from the Daily Item about Michigan and the Midwest, 4 states. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer joined Midwestern state leaders in sending a letter to the EPA requesting the emergency fuel waiver to mitigate price fluctuations, which usually are higher during the summer already because of hurricane season and increased demand. We must ensure we're taking all the steps necessary to proactively protect Michiganders against fuel for their access to fuel for their cars, homes, and businesses without delay, Whitmer said in a statement. That's why I'm dedicated to working with the EPA to keep fuel available and affordable for Michiganders by temporarily removing barriers to ensure an adequate and stable fuel supply. All right. So between the lines here, we're talking, okay, we're going to bend the rules for the green, whatever, the green weenies that are out there. we're going to bend the rules because it's an election season and we need Michigan. And that's the bottom line here. We can't have $4 a gallon. I personally, if it's $4 a gallon, we're going for a regime change, because people see $4 a gallon at the pump and they have a heart attack. In Michigan, I can't imagine if I still lived in California and it was $6 or $7 a gallon. It's unbelievable. So I just wanted to get your take. I'm gonna give you the rest of the segment here, Robert, to talk about that. What do you think about that?
Well, this is just the latest example of politicians looking at oil prices and realizing they can't have high oil prices and expect to succeed politically. I mean, look at what the Biden administration has done repeatedly with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, right? There was no emergency, right? The SPR was created after the oil shocks of the 1970s to assure that in case of war, major conflict, major disruption, something or other, that the U.S. had a backstop, right, to be used in times of crisis. Well, the Biden administration didn't use it during a time of crisis. It was only during a time of convenience where they were concerned about oil prices going up and gasoline prices, because when you think about how emotional that is for people, right? We have 270, 280 million motor vehicles in America. I don't know how many zillion, billion small motors, lawnmowers, chainsaws, weed whackers, snowmobiles, boats, all the rest of it. But people will sit there for about 2 or 3 minutes and look at the price of the fuel they're buying. And then it's posted in a big ass sign on the side of the road. So they know the price of gasoline. They can tell you within a dime or so of the amount of that they paid the last time they filled up their car. Ask them how much they paid for milk the last time or a carton of eggs. They don't know, right? But they know the price of fuel. And because of that, politicians pay attention. So this, issue in Michigan is another disruption, another politicization of pipelines. And, you got the Line 5 issue, I think Line 3, I think it is, with Enbridge. Those are important pieces of infrastructure. But the Democratic politicians, and I'm going to say this I'm not a partisan, but this is what they like to play. They like to play games with pipelines, the Keystone XL being the obvious one, because it appeals to the radical left climate activists, and they want to appeal to them and hope that they vote for them. They will, of course, but this is just the latest example. And the politicians are very aware that the price of oil and gasoline is an emotional issue, and they risk their political futures if the prices are too high.
Well, if you're really into the global warming, climate change, whatever you want to say, and I am absolutely certain that there's been a shift, but that's the Earth. I mean, the Earth has had shifts over its 5 billion years of being in existence. So for us to come along and say in the last 50 years and say, oh, we need to fix all this. Come on, everybody, let's get real here. I mean, is it possible, Robert? I got about 30 seconds to go here. Is it possible? Is it possible to implement all these things?
Well, it depends on what all these things you're talking about, because we have been inundated in the past few months with different mandates. The greenhouse gas rule under the EPA being one of the most important ones. The EV mandate which came out in April, again being a critically important one. We are facing, in addition to local and state level mandates on decarbonization. And I'll just make this quick point on climate change. Yes, climate change is a concern. It's not our only concern. So whatever action we take on climate change has to be balanced against these other issues.
That's why Robert's here. That's why he's the pragmatist that he is. That's why he's the author he is, who says he never had a job, which is complete hogwash. I mean, he's been fired his whole life. He just goes in many different directions and does many cool things. Again, my guest today, my buddy Robert Bryce, calling this one the flamethrower. You're listening to the Tom Mann Show. So freaking easy. Here we go. We're rolling. Segment 3 of the Tom Mann Show, sponsored by Jamie, White Law. I got to tell you guys, White Law is where justice meets compassion, and the whole crew over at White Law, they're the best. They're awesome. They're great people. They sponsor the Mad Dog Minutes, which we do 3 times a week. And you can go to our YouTube channel and find all those, or go to our website, tommannshow.com, and find all that stuff there. Links back to everything. All of our buttons are there. All of the players for the podcast are there, everything. White Law helps us support and make sure that we get all these things done. They help us because they are where justice meets compassion. And I'm reading a book on compassion right now. And compassion is one of the superpowers of our being. And if we can understand how powerful compassion is, you can have a great life. White Law is your advocate in times of need. I've had needs. I've had calls where people call me and say I need some advice. I call Jamie and I just say, hey Jamie, what's the cost on something like this? And he gives me a ballpark and I get back to the client and just boom, boom, boom. That's how it works. They are here to listen, support, and fight for what you deserve, just like all of our sponsors with Craig at Ameriprise, Jamie at White Law, and of course, Brock Fletcher at Keller Williams. They're the most trusting people that you want. Contact White Law today for a free consultation. Did I say free? I said free. Visit whitelawpllc.com, nicest website you'll ever see, whitelawpllc.com, or call 517-777-9785. Tell them you heard it from Tommy, because all my radio friends call me Tommy, and that's fine. That's all good. Like it. And away we go. Okay. whitelawpllc.com, or call again 517-777-9785. Thank you, Jamie, so much for what you do, and Christine and everyone over there, the whole crew at White Law. You guys are awesome. All right, back to my show today with my buddy, Robert Bryce, energy expert, calling this one the flamethrower. Robert, did we finish we talked a little tiny bit about that Chevron ordinance. Did we give that enough play that you kind of explain that to everybody, that 40-year gig? Is that big thing? Did you want to finish that thread, or are we good on that?
Well, I'll just and the issue is not the Chevron ordinance. Chevron deference is the term, and what that refers to is that for now 40 years or so, the courts have shown deference to the administrative state because they have said, oh well, you're the bureaucrats, you know best, we'll leave it to you to decide congressional intent. Well, so fast forward to this Loper-Bright decision, which was handed down by the court on June 28th. What was the issue there? Well, the Department of Commerce had issued rules that were forcing commercial fishermen to pay to have observers come onto their boats and to make sure that they were complying with different federal regulations. Well, so the plaintiff, Loper-Bright Enterprises, along with is it Relentless Inc., I think is the name of the other plaintiff. My friend Megan Lapp was one of the plaintiffs in the case. She's a fisherwoman out of Rhode Island. And they sued and said, this is overreach by the Department of Commerce. You are forcing us to take on this inordinate amount of cost and inconvenience, and Congress never made this law. You just made this up. So that was the case. That was the pivotal issue there in that case. And the Supreme Court handed down this decision on a 6-3 vote. The conservative justices prevailing, saying, no, you've overstepped here. The administrative state doesn't have this power to do this, to make these mandates. So what does this mean, I guess, in just very briefly, and I've talked about this in several of my presentations recently, including in just the other day when I spoke to the Kansas Electric Cooperatives. Well, this is a very important decision. It's going to be litigated. We're going to see a flood of litigation that's going to happen in the next few years regarding a lot of the federal regulations that have been handed down from the administrative state. It's not going to end the administrative state. It's not yet clear what it's going to mean for the states, right? Where, remember, a lot of these EV mandates at the state level are happening from the administrative state, not from the assemblies or the legislatures, like the California Air Resources Board was the one that mandated EVs in California, not the California Assembly. And then finally, the point that I make as well is that while this is important, it's not going to fix the electric grid. The electric grid that we have now is increasingly fragile. We're seeing more and more blackouts, a lot more warnings about the fragility of the grid. So there are many things coming together here, but the thing that I've been talking about a lot is the fragility of the electric grid, the fact that we need more generation. It's difficult to expand the grid, high voltage transmission, all these things coming together, supply chains, labor force, all around the expansion of the grid, the resilience and affordability of electricity, all are key issues that we're going to have to deal with now for many years to come.
I saw one of your videos. I watch a lot of your videos, and you were talking about electricity and electricity growth. And you kind of recap that because you're talking about India and you're talking about China and how much electricity they're using and how much and how they generate this electricity and the projections in the future and how that, well, I'll just let you tell the story because you say it a heck of a lot better than I do. Go ahead, Robert, please.
Well, sure. I wrote this on my Substack just a couple of days ago, robertbryce.substack.com. And I pointed out that this year globally, electricity use will grow by about 4%. That's according to the International Energy Agency in their report that they released in July. And they're projecting that global demand will increase again by 4% next year. So this is very robust growth. This means that if you apply the law of 72, you divide 4 into 72, we'll double the global electricity demand in less than 20 years. And that's been true historically. So electricity is the world's fastest growing and most important form of energy. It's the form of energy we crave over every other. So why does this matter to us here in the United States? Well, our demand is growing very rapidly as well. It's going to be up by about 3.5% this year, which is a big gain over last year when power demand actually fell by about 1.5, something like that. But the key is what's going on, not just in the United States, of course, all of that matters, but it's really what's happening in China and India, where in India this year, the IEA expects power demand will grow by 8%. Tom, that means it's doubling. India's power demand will double at the current rate every 9 years. I mean, this is just a staggering rate of growth in a country that has 1.4 billion people. And what are the people in India doing? They're buying air conditioners. And industry is growing, and industrial plants are moving to India, trying to hedge their bets against China. Meanwhile, in China, power demand is growing by 6.5%. So, and what are those countries doing? They're burning more coal. So while I delude ourselves with this conceit, and I think that's the right word in the West about, oh, we're going to solve climate change with climate hawks and climate activism and just stop oil and all the rest of it. It's decimal dust in the big picture because of what is happening in India and China. And to be clear, I'm not saying what we do doesn't matter. What I am saying is that it doesn't matter very much, given this staggering growth that we're seeing in the use of coal, the industrialization in India, China, Vietnam, Indonesia, other countries in South Asia. This is where this is the story. And, we delude ourselves to think we're going to solve climate change or brag about, oh, we're spending all these hundreds of billions of dollars on the Inflation Reduction Act. And this is the most important law ever passed, ever, to quote the president, on climate action. Well, okay, yeah, you can spend all that money. It doesn't mean it's going to change the temperature.
That's absolutely correct. Absolutely. Decimal dust. I want to get to quick.
A fart in a hurricane, Tom, I think is the other.
Oh, I like it. I want you to give me about a 1 minute, because I caught this in one of your other videos on co-ops and how much you love co-ops.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, how long do we have?
What? Set it up and we'll come back and we'll finish it because that'll feed us into the offshore wind and motor fuel. But
Sure.
Just set it up and we'll come back after I give you the signal. And we'll finish the thread when we come back.
Sure. So why do I love electric cooperatives? Because they are the bedrock of rural America. All across the country, the overwhelming majority, well, the majority of the land mass of America is served by electric cooperatives. They serve rural America. They are living remnants of the New Deal. They are the living survivors of what this change in corporatism that occurred during the New Deal, courtesy of FDR, Burton Wheeler, Sam Rayburn, and George Norris from Nebraska. They saw what was happening in the electricity market and said, we need to change this. And they did.
We'll come back. We'll finish that thread because it's a very interesting story. Lyndon Johnson had a lot to do with that too, because I read his biography and I know that Robert's a big fan of Lyndon Johnson. So we can talk about that. You're listening to the Tom Mann Show, calling this one the Flamethrower with my buddy, Robert Bryce. We're talking energy here. Stick around, everybody. We'll be right back. Boom. Rolling, baby. Just rolling. Here we go. We'll jump right into the offshore wind, whatever.
Scandal, scam, stupidity, foolishness.
Scam. There we go. That feeding into because I think in Lansing we have the Board of Water and Light, which is a co-op, and they're owned by the city, which is owned by the people, of course, supposedly. And so, they seem to be pretty solid. I mean, except when we have an ice storm and they knock down all of our aerial wires. and take them a week to get everything fixed. But that's a whole nother story. Here we go. Fourth segment of Tom Mann Show is sponsored by Brock Fletcher, the selling team of Keller Williams Realty. Full disclosure on all of our sponsors, we've utilized all of their services, especially with Brock, especially with Craig and with Jamie, all of them, because we trust them. The selling team of Keller Williams Realty helped us sell Big House Holt, helped us buy Little House Lansing, where we're recording this episode today with Robert Bryce. If you need some help, you can either go to our website, tommattshow.com, and listen to some of our Reality of Real Estate podcasts, the old radio programs, to put them into podcasts of Brock. He's got about 15 or 20 of them up there, all different topics. He'll answer all the questions. He'll do that if you call him. Call him at these couple of numbers, 517-853-6408, 853-6408. That's the office number, everybody. Or you can use his cell phone number, which he encourages people to do. Don't be afraid. Give him a shout. 517-303-3262. Go online to kwsellingteam.com. kwsellingteam.com. Go to our website, tommattshow.com. Click on any of those banners at the bottom of that homepage, and it'll take you right to our friends and our sponsors. Help them help us, because they're the bomb. Most agents start marketing after you list with them. That's a fact. What Brock does, he invests his marketing dollars so that he can get you the best bang for your buck with your homes. And with the way the real estate is nowadays, with the low supply, the super high demand, with interest rates all over the place, it's a very challenging situation with real estate, with everything, frankly. But that's the whole thing, everybody, about having experts come on this program and sponsor us and talk to us and help you understand what in the heck is happening in the world. Our three sponsors and our guests are the best. And that's why we do what we do. And that's why we're syndicated on the Michigan Talk Network. And that's that, starting our 14th season here in a couple of months. Case closed. Okay, back to Robert Bryce, my guest today. I threw him a quick thread at the previous segment about electric co-ops. And he was kind of giving us the lowdown on the historical perspective and why it's so important to understand this, because this is going to lead us into the base of the conversation today with Robert, with offshore wind and that scam and motor fuel. But first, let's set up the electric co-ops. Robert, I got a question with the electric co-ops. If we would have taken that money, that the $7 billion that they earmarked for charging stations that they didn't build any charging stations for, and if they would have just invested that money into our electric infrastructure as a starting point, because I know, being a former low voltage guy myself, I know that that's not going to be even close to getting, but at least it's a start. That's where they should be putting this money. They should be putting this money not into charging stations. They should be putting money into the distribution framework for these electric co-ops and helping them with having a little more robust delivery systems. Am I on target with that?
Well, let me back up just for a minute and just fill out the why I'm so, in favor of cooperatives and public power. First, let's dial back almost 100 years, 90 years, and look at where America was in the 1920s, 1930s. The big electric utilities were monopolies then. You only had the monopolies. You didn't have co-ops. You didn't have public power. And so rural areas, small towns, they generally didn't have good electric service, or many of them didn't have it at all. And this is not ancient history, Tom, to think about the era of pre-electrification in America. My dear friend Chris Cawthon and I have been friends for 50 years. His dad, Ron, remembers in the late 1940s growing up on a farm in Veneta where they didn't have power. He remembers the day they got electricity in their farmhouse outside of Veneta, Oklahoma. So this is within living memory. And what happened in Veneta, Oklahoma, and in other rural areas across the country, they got electrification because of the passage of the Public Utility Holding Company Act of 1935 and the Rural Electrification Act of 1936. And those were two measures that really FDR campaigned on them in 1932 to break the big trusts. And he attacked Samuel Insull, I think unfairly in many ways, but nevertheless, the result is that today we have now 2,000 publicly owned power entities. Like you're in Lansing, you have a city-owned utility there. It's not a cooperative, it's city-owned. The city owns it. Like I live in Austin, we have Austin Energy. The city owns the electric utility. They also own the water utility. They also own the airport, right? That's not the case in every city, but Texas also has tons of co-ops. So does Kansas. I spoke in Kansas a few days ago to the Kansas Electric Cooperative. Almost all of Kansas is covered by cooperatives. So they are part of the fabric of rural America. And that's one of the reasons why I love them the way I do. And it's that, again, I'm just incredibly privileged and lucky in my career. I get to go around and meet these people that are on the boards of these cooperatives, and they're the small merchants, they're the ranchers, they're the farmers, the sad sack farmers who always pour mouth and everything, but they're also the most optimistic people. And so it's incredible to me to be able to get to know these people whose job it is. They're elected to the board, and their job is to, as board members, is to look after the public trust. And so that's one of the reasons why I just think this is such a critically important part of America, this diffusion of economic and political power that is embodied by the cooperatives, as well as public power, I would argue as well. But the co-ops, I think, are, again, they're this living remnant of the New Deal, and that public ownership, to me, of these critical assets is just truly important, and one that I think has been one of the many reasons why the United States flourished in the way that it did in the wake of World War II.
No question about it. You got to have power. If you're going to have industry, you got to have power. If you're going to have power, you got to have industry. So that's the way it's worked. That's why India and China, as you were saying earlier, their electric growth is so high. So if back to the second part of that question, if we would have taken some of that money that was earmarked for charging stations that never got built, several $billion, I don't know what that number is, but it was a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk with numbers with B's and T's in front of them, billions and trillions, we're talking a lot of money, a lot of zeros. Would that have been better if they would have allocated some of this as a start for the grid?
Yeah.
Would that have helped? And again, now here's a third question. Give us a guesstimation just so people understand, what do you think it would cost and how long would it take to get our grid up to snuff? What would it cost and how long would it take?
Well, I'll answer the last question first, and as I don't know. And, it depends on what you consider up to snuff, and, how many nines of reliability you expect. Let me just, and I'll make one quick point here. I bought a Generac. I have a 22 kilowatt standby generator that I'm installing in my house. I'm waiting for the natural gas hookup, and then I'm going to have standby power at my house. Why? Because the lights keep going out 3 times in the last year. We've had blackouts of 8 hours or more, and I live in Central Austin. So this is what I do. This is what I study. I have solar panels on the roof of my house. I have a Generac. I might get a battery system. I'm, looking out for number one here, because I see what is happening with the reliability of the electric grid. Regarding the spending on EV charging, I mean, we could do another hour on this, Tom. Electric vehicles are the next big thing, and they always will be. I mean, we've heard the hype around EVs for over a century, and now here we are today, and they're still less than double-digit sales, and the sales are cooling off. Why? Because people look at the EV and they do the comparison on a value proposition. They're saying, thank you. I'll buy the V6. I'll buy the V8, the hybrid, whatever, because they're a better value for the consumer than the fully electric vehicle. So I've been a long time skeptic. I'm still skeptic. EVs are the next big thing. They always will be. We've heard this hype for over a century, and yet where are we today? It's still a niche market product, not a mass market one. So the part that chaps my hide is that the government and ordinary taxpayers are having to subsidize the build out of all these charging stations for EV owners. And who owns EVs? Rich folks. The working class people don't drive EVs. Come on, it's a joke. They can't afford them. So we just and we could talk about China and supply chains and EVs if you want, but this administration is just hell bent on this electric vehicle foolishness, and it's going to be very costly. And I wrote on my Substack a few weeks ago, Ford lost $47,000 for every EV they sold. You're a Michigan guy. They lost $47,000 for every EV they sold in the second quarter. They're going to lose $5 billion this year on their EV madness. Ford Motor Company, a good Michigan company, a Dearborn-based, bedrock American company that is a legendary company in America, and they're just pissing this money away.
When you subsidize losses and you know that you're going to get a handoff, what's the big problem? Just follow the money. I'm gonna take this through, Robert, because we're gonna come up on break here. And now when we come back from break, everybody, we're gonna talk about offshore wind and the scam and motor fuel and how all this ties together between the co-ops and power generations and all of these types of things that we've been discussing. We're all over the place because energy is a very complex and very massive topic. And that's why it's great to have Robert as a friend and as a subject matter expert to come into the show and discuss these things. Calling this one today, and you can hear why. We call him Robert Bryce, the flamethrower. His third visit to the radio program. This is the Tom Matt Show. We could talk for freaking 3 hours.
Oh,
Easy.
yeah.
Easy. Here we go. Segment 5. This is plug. So I'm going to throw it to you, Robert, after I do my, website stuff. Take as long as you want to promote all your speaking and everything and whatever you want. Okay.
Okay.
Here we go.
Is this the final segment? How many more segments do we have, Tom?
This is the final one.
Okay.
Segment, about 10 minutes, 12 minutes.
Okay.
We're rolling, making great time. Here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. Fifth segment of the Tom Matt Show, carried on several of our radio stations and, of course, on our podcast. If you miss any of the broadcast and you're not on that fifth segment, you can always go to tommattshow.com and get the podcast, get any of the podcasts. They're all there. They're all free. And just subscribe to whichever carrier you want to get, whichever one you feel is good for you. Again, tommattshow.com, and send us any ideas. You can go to the contact box on the website, goes right to Sandy's email. She will get those questions to us, or guests, or things. If you got questions you want to pose to our experts, please do, because we cover everything under the sun except for politics and religion. We leave those for the other experts. Okay, Robert Bryce is my guest, the flamethrower. Robert, before we get back into the offshore wind scam and motor fuel, let's get all your contact info. How would you like people to contact you, your books, all of your speaking? Go ahead, please.
Oh gosh, I'm easy to find on the Google, Tom. I'm on Substack, robertbryce.substack.com. You can see my website, robertbryce.com. I'm on TikTok. Oh yeah, I'm on TikTok. You know I'm on TikTok.
Yes, you
I'm
are.
I'm on YouTube. I'm on LinkedIn. I think I'm on Instagram. I'm hard to miss on the Google. But by all means, of course, check out our new docuseries, juicetheseries.com is the website, juicetheseries.com. The 5-part episode on electricity in America. Each episode's about 20 minutes. I'm really proud of it. It came out really well. Kudos to my colleague, Tyson Culver. It's called Juice, Power, Politics, and the Grid. And so where everybody's talking about the grid these days, well, it's what our docuseries looks at and ends up being very pro-nuclear, because I'm pro-nuclear.
It's an excellent series. I've seen it. It's great. You guys got to check it out. Juiced. Say it again. Juiced.
Juice, Power, Politics, and the Grid.
Juice,
but you don't
Power,
even have to remember. You don't have to remember that. You just have to remember juicetheseries.com. Did I mention Juice the Series? I hope I mentioned juicetheseries.com.
And your website's well done too, and you can find all your stuff there too. So let's get into this offshore wind scam.
Sure.
And talk about things falling into the ocean, whales dying, birds getting killed, and things don't work. And then what are you going to do with all of this stuff that falls into the ocean? And how are you going to dispose of all of these? Did I touch on a couple of topics for you?
You did. Thanks. Well, let's start with offshore wind, because this is the part that just to me is, as my late brother John Bryce just, grills my cheese, chaps my hide, leaves me just absolutely slack-jawed at the waste of money and the industrialization of our oceans and the lack of concern for the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale that is underway here. So let me just back up for a second. So the Biden administration, because they're Democrats, I don't know whether the Democrats are just have this they're enamored of offshore wind energy. The Obama administration said they had an aim of 20 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2020 or so. This was 10 years ago, more than that, 13 years ago. We've only developed about less than 200 megawatts. Well, why is it? Because putting anything in salt water is just a bad idea if you don't have to. But what is being done in the name of climate change is this push to industrialize the eastern seaboard with not just potentially hundreds of offshore wind turbines, but thousands of them. And where are they going? You look at the maps and you very clearly can see that these areas that are being leased for offshore wind energy are right in the middle of, or in fact, right on top of known habitat for the North Atlantic right whale. There are only about 370 individuals left of this species, and I think 70 or 80 breeding females. They're critically endangered. Now imagine, Tom, and this is where I just, I'm going to go off. Imagine if the oil and gas industry had said, "Oh, we want to put hundreds or thousands of offshore platforms off the eastern seaboard." What do you think the Sierra Club and the Natural Resources Defense Council and Conservation Law Foundation and Earth Justice and environmental, they would be having an absolute freaking conniption fit, saying, "Oh, you can't do this. What about the whales? What about the whales?" But now, because it's wind, crickets. They act like, "Oh, it doesn't matter. This doesn't harm the whales." I think it is very clear that there is harm that is happening. And there was a recent analysis done by a Rutgers professor who said there's no doubt that the sonar work that they've used to do the mapping and to site these projects has harmed the whales. And we've seen a bunch of strandings over the past 24 months. And yet these NGOs, they're not environmental groups, they're NGOs, say, "Oh, it's not that important." And then, so what has happened just in the last few weeks? I spoke in Nantucket and in Newport, July 7th and 8th, about offshore wind. On June 13th, a Saturday, one of the wind turbine blades off Vineyard Wind, which is this project that is owned by two foreign companies. So here we have the US government subsidizing foreign companies to industrialize our oceans and harm our whales and raise our electric rates. But I digress. A blade from this wind turbine built by GE Vernova disintegrates in calm weather. In calm weather, it falls apart, falls into the ocean. A couple of days later, it took 2 days for Vineyard Wind to notify the town of Nantucket that this had happened. Over the following couple of days, tons of this fiberglass debris wash up on Nantucket beaches in the middle of the summer tourist season. And so there's immediate stop work order. GE Vernova says, "Oh, it's a manufacturing." What did they call it? It was a manufacturing dereliction. What was it? I'll have to look up the thing.
Some kind of defect.
Oh yeah, but anyway, it's just this insanity that we're going to industrialize our oceans and think that this is going to have some impact on climate change. It won't. And all these NGOs, the Sierra Club, NRDC, they're on the pay of these. They're in bed with the offshore wind companies. And who are the key offshore wind companies? Foreign oil companies. It's just like Shell, BP, Total Energy, and Equinor. These are oil companies that are coming into American waters to put up wind turbines, and the Sierra Clubbers are in bed with them, along with the National Wildlife Federation. I mean, it's like Kennedy and the dead baby cub. I mean, you just couldn't make it up. But they're just shameless. And I have a deep disdain for these groups because I just think what they're doing is just so incredibly cynical and so just disgusting, frankly. I mean, I was in British Columbia a few weeks ago. I saw an offshore. I went offshore and went whale watching. Saw a humpback. I saw a gray whale in the Galapagos a few years ago. Why in the world? Why in the name of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph are they so keen on putting all these wind projects in the middle of whale habitat? I mean, I just can't believe it. I mean, it's just so disgusting to me. Now you got me going.
Well, let's keep going with motor fuel because you got a couple minutes before we got to wrap this bad boy. We can get all this in. Motor fuel to springboard off of your disdain for offshore wind. What's going on?
Well, what we're seeing is record. There are a lot of things we could talk about with motor fuel, the corn ethanol scam, if you want. But what happened just in May? We had record gasoline demand for seasonal demand. So, what's interesting is despite all this push for electric vehicles and the rest of it, what is happening in the United States? People are driving more. And what does that mean? More demand for gasoline. Further, just in the last few days, the Energy Information Administration here in the United States estimated that global oil demand will increase again this year by about 1.1 million barrels and another per day, and next year by about 1.4. So despite all these claims of just stop oil and these idiot kids throwing paint on Van Gogh paintings and the rest of it, oil runs the global economy, and the idea that we're just going to just quit using it. Well, you first, don't drive, don't fly, don't buy anything that gets to the grocery on a diesel truck, because you're so high-minded. Well, oil is the economy, as Art Berman says. And so, again, we could talk further about any part of that, but what I care about, Tom, and I'll, maybe this is a good place to stop. Who do I care about? Why do I get so passionate about these issues? Is because the poor and the middle class are getting shafted. All of this decarbonization policy screws the poor and the middle class, every bit of it. Expensive energy is the enemy of the poor and the middle class, and they are largely being ignored in the political discussion these days. And what I hope to do, and what in my work, is to point this out, that these schemes, offshore wind, electric vehicles, bans on natural gas, all are terrible for the poor and the working class.
That's Robert Bryce, calling him the flamethrower, the title of today's episode. What's your takeaway for today, Robert? We got a couple minutes before we got to go to break this bad boy down. What's your takeaway? Go right ahead, please.
Well, robertbryce.substack.com. How about that as a takeaway? I'd also ask people, if you care about these issues, energy can be complicated, but it's not that complicated. I mean, look, if I can figure it out, anybody can, right? This isn't rocket surgery here. But it takes some work to understand the difference between energy and power. They're not the same things. Energy is the ability to do work. Power is the rate at which work gets done. We convert energy into power, into useful power. So understanding these things, it's basic math, basic physics. It's not that hard to understand. But if I were to say, what is the one takeaway, it's that we need energy, and we need it cheap, abundant, and reliable, in that order. And that's being lost. It's being obscured in a lot of this headlong rush toward making climate the only issue. Climate change is a concern. It's not our only concern.
His name is Robert Bryce. Called this one the flamethrower. He's our energy expert. He's my friend. He's a great author. If you don't want to read the books, Robert's books, 6 or 7 books that he's written, watch the documentary. Watch the documentary. There's 3 million people who've watched the documentary. It's free. They're short. They're 20 minutes long each. Go for it. Check those out. If our show fits your business or group's mission, we want to be of service to you through our topics and guests. Our subject matter experts are excellent, just like Robert Bryce. I call him RB. If you missed any portion of the show, go to the TomMattShow.com website, get any of the podcasts there. They're always there. Always remember, before you can share love with others, you must love yourself first. Thanks again to Robert Bryce, Sandy Matt, Craig Stiles, Brock Fletcher. We got Jamie White. We'll talk to everybody next weekend. Have a great week. Everybody go out and ignite your life. Remember, we are the home of the Refirement Zone. I want to thank again Mitch Anderson and Vanessa for doing what they do. Remember, the Tom Matt Show is a production of Boomers Rock Media. We want to bring your story to life. Thank you so much for joining us, subscribing, and doing all those good things. Go check out Robert's videos and buy his books. We are out. Beautiful. In the can, baby.
All right, homie.
Let's get you back as often as you want, and I'll just keep sending you articles. I don't know if you'd had seen that reblend thing with Michigan, but and I see these things. My subscription to the Wall Street Journal finally expired, and they wanted to charge me the full price, so I said no. So they'll be back.
Yeah.
You know how they go. They give me about 6 months, and then they'll give me the cheap student version again.
Right.
Thank you so much,
buddy. Let me ask you one quick question. So what do you think your reach is, Tom? How many listeners do you think you have?
That's really hard to say, because radio is funny, especially with Michigan Talk Network, with all of these small, you talk about small co-ops with electric. We got all these mom and pop radio stations in the Michigan Talk Network. There's 40, 50 stations. Not all of them are talk. A lot of them are music, but and we don't get any metrics for them. So it's really hard to say. All I know is I'm glad to be on the air. And say, for example, the reach here, WGIM, they have a schedule for like 4 times a weekend. So we get preempted with baseball and football and all that, college stuff. But we're typically Sundays. So to give you an honest answer, I don't know. I mean, but the podcast numbers have been growing and consistently. And the radio stuff, in the past, I wanted to be huge and massive on radio, but it's really the podcast, as you know, that is the backbone to everything now.
So
And
what
so,
are you doing on downloads on the pod?
I know I'd have to talk to Mitch about that. He said we're in the top like 15% for podcasts, which is not that much because typically people don't download
Right.
uh podcasts that much. The numbers are pretty small actually.
Yeah.
So, but he said we're in the top 15% because we've been at this for so long and we just have that many episodes. So
Gotcha.
whatever it is,
Good.
we're making a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
that's
it's like,
good. Well, I'm just curious because, I did my pod for 4 years and I gave it up in March because I was just working too much. But, I'm always just curious to see how other people are doing with it. So
it's a good
it's
choice.
always, I got to jump, Tom, because I got a 12 o'clock, but it's always a pleasure, my friend. Let's do it again. And
All
let
right,
me know
brother.
let me know when you come to A-Town.
I will for sure.
All right.
Thank you, brother. Talk
All
to
right,
you soon.
homie.
All right,
See
brother.
you.
Bye. Robert Bryce called me homie. Makes me want to cry. He is so awesome. The guy is just so hilarious on this super serious topic. And let me step back here. Flamethrower. The reason I called it flamethrower, and we never even got into it because you can't have an electric flamethrower. You can have a propane flamethrower, and it's got to have some kind of something that burns. And so understand that if you become more educated about all this stuff, follow the money, everybody. Just follow the freaking money. That's all there is to it. And from there, I will leave it and say thank you to Robert Bryce and thank you to all of the listeners and the followers of the radio program and the podcast and everything that we do. Thank you so much. We're approaching 1 million views on YouTube, which is a little surreal to me. But you know what? You just got to stay at it. Just if you've got something you want to do in your refinement zone, use me as an example. Just get busy. Just get busy. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, doing all those cool things. Tell everybody about our show, and we will talk to you next time. Until then, I'm Papa Tom. Have a great day, everybody. Peace out. Love y'all.